When I use the phrase camp experience, what comes to your mind? What words might you use to describe your time at QMCC? Maybe you think about friendship or companionship. Maybe you think about solidarity and closeness, togetherness. Maybe the QMCC experience for you is getting together with people who share a common interest and love for God. If these words or something like them came to your mind, you're really saying one thing at the core. You're saying that the time you spend at camp in the summer is about true fellowship. The dictionary defines fellowship as friendly association, especially with people who share one's interests. It also lists words like companionship, friendship, camaraderie, association, closeness, togetherness, and solidarity as synonyms. Now that sounds a lot like what we're missing this summer. And I assure you that the kiddos, the camp staff, your session directors, the QMCC board, and your fellow campers are all missing you just as much as you're missing them this summer. And I assure you they're excited to be part of your camp experience next year. But even in these unprecedented times, even when we can't gather together for camp, even when we miss some of these key attributes of fellowship, I think God reminds us in the Bible that there are many parts of fellowship that are never missing in the life of a Christian. A couple of those things that I would like to talk about for just a moment are strength and love. No matter what's going on in the world around them, strength and love are found in the fellowship of Christians and the family of God. Strength and love are things that can easily be found at QMCC, but they're not exclusive to Lone Wolf, Oklahoma. We can find them in the midst of a pandemic. Wherever we are, we just might need to look a little harder. First, biblical fellowship is strength because it gives us identity and family. It gives us strength in our identity because when we keep God's word and His commandments, we can have fellowship with Christ. When we can use all of those words I mentioned earlier, companionship, friendship, camaraderie, association, closeness, togetherness, and solidarity, to describe our relationship with Jesus, we can have confidence and boldness in our faith. That connection with God can bring about amazing strength. And we can see this in the Bible's account of early Christians, like in Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. That strength and confidence Peter and John had, it wasn't because of their upbringing. It wasn't because of their education. It was because they were identified as having fellowship with Jesus. 2 Timothy 4:16 and 17, Paul feels that same fellowship with Jesus and says, "At my first defense, no one supported me, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that through me the proclamation might be fully accomplished, and that all the Gentiles might hear. And I was rescued out of the lion's mouth." Matthew 19 and 26 says, Jesus looked at them and said, "With man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible." You see, when we have fellowship with Christ, we have an identity more powerful than anything on this earth. We can build confidence and find strength in that. Fellowship also gives us strength when we have it with other Christians. When we have a church family, everyone desires a place to belong. And when someone can truly say, "I belong," when someone can truly be accepted with all their faults, when you have a church family made up of other redeemed sinners, you can have incredible strength and you can take confidence in that. We find this type of blessing in Ephesians chapter 2. Verse 12 says, "Remember that you were at that time separate from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you, who formerly were far off, have been brought near by the blood of Christ." That blood of Christ not only covers the sin that separated man from God, that blood of Christ washes away the differences and the things that separated man from other people. Paul talks more about this unity in verse 19. "So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and are of God's household." Being part of God's household, being part of a church family, is what builds strength in us. When we have fellowship with one another, the church family is where we find mutual care. It's where we take care of every other member. It's where we let down our guard and are real with each other and ourselves. It results in shared pain, shared suffering, shared heartache. It results in vulnerability and in weakness. But also, and more importantly, we grow, we encourage, we restore, we honor, and we rejoice together. Fellowship is strength, because when we follow His word, we have a relationship with God. And that relationship gives us the confidence of a powerful identity and an eternal church family. The second part of fellowship in our message today is love. Biblical fellowship is shown in who we choose to be around, who we spend our time with, how we give and receive those things that God has blessed us with. Fellowship is really that agape kind of love, that brotherly love. It's hard to think of camp without thinking of the great people that we get to spend time with in the summer. And fellowship is really seeking those kind of relationships, finding those kind of people in our daily walk. 1 Corinthians 15:33 talks about how the people that we're around will affect our character. And 2 Corinthians 6, we're reminded that light can't have fellowship with darkness. Who we choose to be around will always affect and influence our attitudes and our values even. And a person can really grow spiritually when they choose relationships and fellowships with people that help make that possible. When they choose to fellowship and have relationships with the church. Giving and receiving is also an example of love, and it's a concept that's woven throughout Christian fellowship. Luke writes about this kind of fellowship in the early church in Acts 2. And verse 42 and following says, "They were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all those who had believed were together, and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions, and were sharing with all, as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved." This passage really starts with a few of the essential things that we should be devoted to as Christians. The teaching of the apostles, prayer, and of fellowship, spending time with one another. Fellowship in the early church was really sharing that time and sharing their possessions. And it's this kind of loving fellowship that really led to what is arguably the greatest period of growth for the Lord's church. Paul talks about sharing and gives us insight into the fact that sharing means receiving with thanksgiving as much as it means unselfishly giving. He says in Philippians 4, verses 15 through 18, "You yourselves also know, Philippians, that at the first preaching of the gospel, after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, but you alone. For even in Thessalonica you sent a gift more than once for my needs. Not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek for the profit which increases to your account. But I have received everything in full, and have an abundance. I am amply supplied, having received from Epaphroditus what you have sent, a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God." The church at Philippi was practicing fellowship when they sent these gifts, these things that Paul needed, these things that were well-pleasing to God. They were taking part in fellowship. And furthermore, Paul was practicing fellowship, was being part of that community when he sent this letter and made sure that they were thanked for that. Again, that well-pleasing gift. Fellowship is well-pleasing to God. It's a place of love where giving and receiving happen and exist abundantly. Brotherly love, or that agape kind of love and fellowship that we often find at camp, and more importantly, we see examples of throughout the Bible, is described by Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, and many of you know this passage well. This particular passage is expanded upon to describe brotherly love or agape love by one author like this: "Love is patient and allows time for a brother to mature. Love is kind even when a brother is unkind. Love is not jealous, even if a brother has something we don't. Love does not brag, even if someone has something his brother does not. Love does not act unbecomingly." So there's never a reason to be rude, crude, or inconsiderate to a brother. "Love does not seek its own, but it looks out for the interest of his brother. Love is not provoked, but it turns the other cheek and goes the second mile. Love does not take account of wrong suffered. It forgets the bad, the ugly, the things that he's suffered without trying to get even. Love does not rejoice in unrighteousness and doesn't like to hear of bad things happening, even to bad people. Love bears all things and delights in taking the heaviest load, the dirtiest job, the shortest stick. Love believes all things, even when a brother is disappointed in the past or he's lost faith in himself. Love hopes all things. Even if things look bad, he continues to hope against all odds. Love endures all things, even when it means heartbreak, injustice, and betrayal. Love never fails, even when a brother is obnoxious, cranky, unlovable, or mean. So this love through fellowship is really a demonstration of the love that Christ had for the world. It's fellowship that we're called to at all times, no matter what's going on around us. It's that willed kind of love, or that choice to love in spite of. It doesn't depend on people being worthy or deserving, because it's unselfish and it's a service. It's giving and receiving. It's the type of fellowship that is essential to true Christianity. Strength and love are by no means the only essentials or the only products of fellowship. But I believe they're great things to think about and focus on right now during uncertain and uncharted times. I hope you will look for an opportunity to bring that camp experience to whatever you're doing this week. Because this kind of fellowship, this strength, and this love that the Bible gives us so many examples of, that usually accompanies our time at QMCC, it doesn't only exist between Devo and Young's. It's true fellowship that brings us together this summer wherever we are, socially divided, but spiritually united.